Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Hi folks, this is Cesar. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a great show. My first guest is a good friend of mine, William Camenni. He is a Herndon resident. We do share that in common. Probably one of the few things we share in common. We're on the opposite sides of many issues. My good friend Bill is a former Air Force officer and also an engineer and a small business owner. Bill's a great guy. You're going to like hearing from him. He has served 33 years in the Air Force and Air National Guard as a fighter pilot. His career has actually spanned from the Vietnam War to the late 90s. And he has over 4,000 flying hours. He retired as a colonel, and he also has a parallel career in engineering. He's worked on the Apollo and space shuttle programs. Needless to say, he's pretty much a rocket scientist. And the one thing I will tell you about Bill, he is happily retired now. He's collecting Social Security payments that the millennials will never get to share because they support politicians building an ever-increasing federal debt. Bill, did I get that right, my friend?
You got it right.
Thank you so much for coming in today, Bill.
My pleasure.
I tell you, as I said earlier, we don't agree on a lot of things. We're friends. We can certainly agree on our veterans and how we as a country, as a community, this Commonwealth can come together and do what is necessary for them. Agreed?
Totally agree on that.
No.
Totally.
What gets you inspired? What is it that drives you? Why do you do what you do? Because I want the folks to know this is a fascinating thing you do for our veterans.
Well, I do what I do partly because I've been there and I've advanced through the ranks. I started out at the bottom as an airman basic and lucked out and made my way up to colonel. So I've seen all the travails that one goes through in a military career, both on yourself and on your families and all the sacrifices they make.
Sure.
And too often I'm starting to see, in spite of what we see so much day to day when we hear the comments, thank you for your service. At times I start wondering if that's merely mouthing a platitude.
It's lip service.
That really people don't understand what's behind that thank you for your service.
Sure.
And I think it's important that we recognize what veterans do, what the military folks do, and then when they become veterans, what the public owes them. For instance, it's hard to believe, I was just looking back now that we're celebrating the Pearl Harbor anniversary, we had 133 million people in 1941. And over 10 to 12% of those actually served in the military. Now when you throw out the females and the children and the elderly, that was a lot of people were serving in the military. And people got to understand what the sacrifice was and the appreciation. Nowadays, a mere less than 1%, about 0.4% actually wear the uniform. And they keep 330 million of us free. And they come back home and we start wondering if they're going to be able to appreciate the service and sacrifice they've done.
So the country's basically disconnected. The country's not invested in these initiatives. What happened, Bill? What happened that took us from a country, an environment, the culture, where we not only were invested, but we really valued the military? So what happened? Take us through that. What did you see?
I think it's a sequence of things that caused us there. One is because not as many people are involved, a lot of people aren't aware of what goes on, that those people are out there. I mean, while that 0.5% are out there serving us in the farthest reaches of the world, the rest of us at the mall texting each other.
Sure.
And we're really not cognizant of what's going on over there. Every now and then we may see something on a TV story or something like that, but other than that, people don't appreciate what's going on. Whereas in World War II, everybody was involved. I remember
we had the draft, Bill.
We had the draft. And that's my second point. The second part of the sequence is we had the draft, and I was one of those that was motivated partly by the draft, but also by, I remember an ROTC instructor telling us, well, Mr. Camenni, sure, you don't have to go in here now. And at that time I had a physical deferment if I wanted to play it. But he said, what have you done for your country? You know, you've benefited pretty well. You're going to a nice college. You've been fortunate to be here and partake of all this, but there's a lot of people that put a lot on the line 20, 30 years ago that you could be here. And he kind of woke me up on a couple of things, that there's a little bit more than just what's good for me. And I think we're losing that today. There's too much of us worried about what's good for me and we don't understand that we all have to sacrifice. The draft was a good motivator to wake you up as to what your role is going to be. We don't have that anymore, and we're having a division. I hate to see it, but we have, as Secretary Gates said, for a lot of people, although they may express noble sentiments about service, it's something for someone else and their children to do.
Sure, sure. I think, correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers, but of the members in the House and the Senate, I heard a number that was insane. 4 had a son or daughter, family member that was currently serving. Is that?
It's very low. I don't know what the exact number is because we're having changeovers every 2 years. But it's very low, and also the members themselves. I think we're below 20% now. I'm not sure. It's 25 or 20% or something like that. Whereas if you go back to the 1950s and 60s, that World War II generation was the ones that were doing all of our political office holders and all that stuff. They everybody knew what the military was about and when the sacrifices that were there, and they were very receptive to veterans' needs, and that, which, by the way, are not World War II oriented. They go back to Abraham Lincoln, who said to take care in his second inaugural, we have a duty to take care of the he who was born in the battle and his widows and orphans, and I think we have to continue that today.
So, Bill, how do we fix that? How do we start to address some of those shortcomings?
Well, politically, you could never pull this off, but I thought the draft was pretty good in that people were forced into some type of service acknowledgement. You wouldn't have to have a draft, I think, where everybody serves in the military, but where they're forced to serve in a lot of other
some
venues.
capacity.
Some capacity to realize that there's a world beyond yourself.
Sure. I couldn't agree more. I think there are some things that, as a citizen of this great country, this nation, that we are obligated to pay back. And for too many people, some of my family members, they're oblivious to what happens, the sacrifices some of the military families and veterans have gone through. My issue also is, how do we get people to relate to what the sacrifice is when, as you said, they're not connected in any way? They're worried about, their text messages, and how do we address the culture that's so distracted?
It's not too easy because it not only applies to our culture regarding veterans, but a lot of other areas where we're so prosperous and happy, we're just going about our own way and not doing that. Plus, it's an education process too. I think too few of our politicians, having themselves and their children not served, don't understand. Therefore, they used to be the biggest proponents of veterans care and benefits packages and all. And also, we have to stop. I think there's a sort of a stereotype that's coming back now, and it upsets me too, is that everybody coming back from the wars is suffering from PTSD, and that they are. I mean, when we even forget the politics of it, when Secretary Napolitano comes out and puts out a list saying those we have to watch out for in the terror watch are returning military veterans, that really upset me on that. So when you're painting stereotypes like that, not only do people not appreciate the sacrifice, but for a lot of people, they have a negative perspective of the military and the veterans. It's like they're a lower class. They're not like our folks. They have come from the lower incomes groups, and therefore they couldn't get a job or something like that. I volunteer, if I may, just one more. I volunteer out the USO at Dulles Airport there. And Cesar, I am really impressed when I see these 19 and 20-year-olds come in who haven't had the fancy college educations yet. They're going to get them and all. And they're just back from their combat tours. At how eloquent and articulate they are in why they serve and what they're serving for. I wish one congressman had the eloquence and articulation that these young 19-year-olds have. So,
what are you hearing, Bill? What are they saying?
Well, I'll ask them often if what made you serve? Your friends are all having fun, and you decided to go over there and serve. Why are you doing that? And you would think, well, I did it for the college education I might get and all that. And sure, that's a small part of it. But more often than not, it's for something like, well, my dad served, and he really inculcated in me the necessity that if we're going to live in this country, we have an obligation to it. Or they do it, not their dad, but they themselves said, I was just kind of hanging around, and I said, there's better things for me to be doing. I got to do something beyond taking care of myself. I got to worry about what other people and other things are going on out there. And if I need to also help and make this country even better than what it was. I'm really impressed. It's overwhelming.
So at a young age, they're already seeing and connecting to a larger entity themselves. That's great. I think for a lot, and I know this firsthand with some of my family members, that connection isn't there. It's kind of about them. It's sort of self-inwardly focused. You are representing no individual organization, group, or anything, but you do a lot of work with a lot of groups out there. Can you name a few just so our
Well, I
folks
mentioned that I work the USO out there. And I try and help out where you can. Where you hear maybe some thing is going on at Fort Belvoir or somewhere that they are looking for folks to come either welcome somebody back or to help out in a project or something. You can do it down there. But there's a lot of opportunities out there. Also, you can, if you're financially available, you can contribute. Things like the Wounded Warrior Project and all that.
Sure.
People don't realize the struggles those families are going through. And that, by the way, that's the other half of the veteran service is also their families serve too. It's a tough life when they're in there. It's an even tougher life should they come home with bodies banged up and all. And so there's a lot of opportunities. There's the Red Cross is very helpful in those affairs. The YMCA's, believe it or not, have a lot of support areas for veterans. So if people look, and we all can get on Google and do some searching around, military service opportunities, and all, you can find out where you might be able to help, because the help is needed out there.
With the Congress we have today, should folks talk to their congressmen, the representatives?
Very much so. I know there's a big long line of people in government before going to the government with their hands out for 1,001 different things. And a lot of people, especially those congressmen who have never served themselves, they may think it's just another constituency looking for a handout. And I think we got to wake some of those congressional people up, and some of the the appointed officials in the executive departments, to wake them up as to who these people are out there and your obligations to them.
Have you had much luck with your Congress representative?
Well, up until the last 2-3 years, they redistrict us there. Frank Wolf was pretty supportive of that, and I'm trying no politics in here.
No, sure.
Jerry Connolly is now our current congressman because of redistricting and all that stuff, and Jerry has been helpful in certain areas where it comes to the benefit side of things. But that's after the fact. That's almost another handout to a constituency on that. I would like him to see him a little more active in being proactive in helping people before that act, of supporting of the military and things.
Okay. Well, Bill, thank you for coming on. Folks, Bill is going to be back in the next 2 segments. We don't agree on a lot, but we can certainly agree on this. Bill, thank you for your service, and we'll be back, folks.
Thank you.
Kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Folks, thank you for coming back. My next guest is Gwendolyn Beck. She is a businesswoman, a very impressive individual. She has had 2 successful careers, one in the financial industry and one in tourism. If you didn't know, Gwendolyn ran for the 8th District of Virginia for the House of Representatives on a platform of being fiscally responsible, socially inclusive, and for a strong defense platform. And she didn't win, but she certainly learned a lot, and she certainly did well. In fact, she was the highest vote getter against Democrats and Republicans as an independent. and she also beat the Libertarian and Green Party candidates that she ran with. Gwendolyn, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Cesar.
So
It's nice.
thanks for being here. Why'd you run?
Because I felt I could make a difference. Because I think that we need business people in the House of Representatives, and actually on all levels of government. Because I've had 2 careers, one in finance and one in tourism, and I think I can bring a lot to the table. Because right now, especially in the House of Representatives, the people aren't talking to each other.
No,
there's not one independent there, and there's 3 in the Senate. There were only 2 in the Senate. But it makes a big difference to have somebody who's really right in the middle and who talks about America and doing what's right for America first.
Sure. Now, with the 2-party system, how tough was it even to get on the ballot?
Actually, to get on the ballot was great because in the state of Virginia, they have certain criteria you have to meet. So in the case of the U.S. House of Representatives, you need 1,000 signatures of registered voters in the district.
Correct.
And the state is really helpful. They say if you can get them to them 2 weeks in advance, they can see if you have a deficit and you need more. We went out and got about 2,000 votes, just in case, because some people say they're registered, they're not sure if they're in the 8th district, and 8, 10, and 11 are so close to each other, so we weren't sure, but we got that set. They were very nice. The election guy, he was so funny, he said, "Are you sure you want to do this?"
That's my question.
Yes, and I said yes, because I do think we can make a difference, and I do think an independent can make a difference who's a sane, middle-of-the-road independent. We have some independents that are way out there, but I'm right in the middle of the road.
I like the first part of your message. You said the business background. I've come from a business background. I've helped quite a few startups go public. I mean, there is a different mindset when you come from that background.
Right.
Again, not taking anything away from anyone in these roles, but it's completely different when you're having to work to a budget and profit margin and loss. Right? You're more aware of the investor or the equity or the taxpayer, right? And I like hearing that people can take that approach. How was that received out there? How did your message?
It was good. Yeah. It was great, because I think what happens is, like, especially with the business is first. You want to do the right thing for the customer. You want to make sure your products are good and everybody is well taken care of. And in this case, so your customer is America.
Right.
The business is America. And I think what happens if you on the Democrat and the Republican team so early on in your life and you start in politics, it almost becomes this football player mentality, or a college, this is your
institutional
college
thinking.
team. Yes. So while competition is good, and they've done a lot of studies that it makes you better, stronger, faster, I think in the case of running a country, it's sucking us down because we're at each other's throats. And after the election, everybody's out there politicking, saying, "Oh, we're going to change everything. We're going to work across the aisle, blah, blah, blah." As soon as they get elected, boom, right back. And the American person, the normal American person, is the one who's going to hurt because of this.
So you got your petition signed. What was that day like when you saw your name on that ballot?
It's like, wow.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
It's real.
It's real.
Okay.
It's very exciting. I'm a very serious person, so when I set my mind to doing something, I do it. And so I expected it to be on the ballot. I expected it to be hard. I really expected pretty much of it. What happened, though, is that I didn't realize that on some of the questions, you really have to just dig down deep into the bottom of your soul to come up with the answers. How do you really feel about this? How do you really feel about the 14-year-old coming across the border, and how are you going to help? And at what point does it hurt the country? And just, it's question after question after question like that. And it's a very interesting process, and I honestly think that really every American should go through it, especially the Americans that have something to offer the country. And it's kind of intimidating when you get the packet of paper from the House Ethics Committee asking about everything you've got everywhere, and you're trying to...
What Swiss bank accounts you have, and all that
Hopefully
good stuff.
you don't have that. I don't have any of that.
Well, okay.
It was pretty...
Some of us do, but...
It was pretty cut and dry for me, but I could see as a business owner or a former business owner like yourself, that's a lot of paperwork to go through.
Which, if any, if you can share with us, you had views going into it. Did any of those evolve, and were you surprised if any of your views evolved, listening the feedback from the people?
I think one of the things that definitely evolved was the strong defense. That was the third leg of the platform, and that did come later because we did one group of literature, and then we went to do the signs in the other group of literature. And anybody who's even in high school or junior high school understands the difference between defense and offense. And this is a defense to make sure that we're safe. But I think at the time, I just realized that we're in such a precarious situation that we have to have a strong military, and we have to make sure that our borders are secure, because all of these bad things that are happening in the Middle East and around the world aren't really happening here because we've had a strong defense, and I think that we need to maintain that. It's very
Were the constituents in the 8th that you spoke with, were they aware of some of the things our previous guests talked about, the sacrifices, the military family? What was your sense?
I think more so in the 8th because we have the Pentagon there. We also have Fort Belvoir, Fort Meade, and a lot of military. So I do think that there's a greater sense in the 8th. And we also have a lot of government workers. And our average income in the 8th is $103,000. It's very high.
Yeah, compared to the nation.
Compared to the
which
nation.
Which is, I think, 42 or something.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
yes.
What would you do differently, looking back?
I would have come here and had some commercials made.
Oh, well,
Yes.
we do public service announcements.
Yes,
We don't
okay.
do commercials, but
Okay.
absolutely.
But I guess you can rent out some things. But I would have done that. I think it's very difficult for an independent because you have to have a grassroots effort that starts from the ground up. So that's one thing. The other thing that was very shocking to me was the media on the level of the ABC, CBS, and the Washington Post. They would cover independence in other locations, but they wouldn't cover them here. And it was...
Why do you think that is?
My personal opinion, I think the Washington Post said we're going to go with Don Beyer very early on, and they stayed with that, although they did give Micah Edmond some space. But they didn't give any of the other candidates. To me, my personal opinion is that the reporters were almost more editorialists than they were reporting the news. So I don't think the people really heard the news and what was going on. But as friends of mine who own newspapers would say, well, no, that's why nobody's buying any newspapers.
Interesting.
So I think that could be changed.
Were you at all surprised with the results in terms of not just your race, but the election in general?
I thought I would do better than I did, but it was still very good. What I found is that the people that I was able to reach voted for me. And not all of them. I mean, some people had some different ideas, but pretty much everybody that I was really able to interact with. And the places that I spent the most time with, say in Arlington, where I live, is where I did the best. And then certain parts of Alexandria, I did really well. It's a problem of raising the money and being able to get out there and talk to people. And it's very unfortunate, but there is a reality that you really need to be with a major party to win a seat and to make a difference.
I'm a Democrat. I'm part of that group, but I will tell you it is frustrating as just an American that loves democracy, where you don't have the ability for anyone to run. Because this was your first time running.
It's my very first time running.
I think the same thing. Everyone should be able to run.
Everybody.
And not be locked into one group or another, because that just, it
But then you get back into the issue of campaign finance. How do you level the playing field? And the only way to do that is to give everybody the same amount of money.
Yeah. Well, if you're in power, you're not going to vote for that.
Right.
Because I think term limits would help, in my opinion. I think term limits, districting, I think hurts the way it's done. Because for a lot of people, they get in to serve, and then it becomes a lifestyle. It becomes a career. And you're a business person, you come from, it's something you do, and then you go on to do something else.
Right.
That was the whole notion of serving. So,
and there's also, I think, the point of the parents doing it and then the children doing it, because they know how to do it. They've got the organization.
It's a family business.
Yes, and now you have so many people that have been raising funds going into running for office. I mean, Governor McAuliffe is a classic example of that. And while I personally think he's going to do a great job because he has more aspirations beyond being governor, it is a different place from what we're used to seeing.
No, absolutely. I just, the fact that, well, if you take the 8th district, you compare it to other districts, not just in Virginia, but across the country, how much money some of these districts have to raise, and in terms of how much the campaigns end up spending, it's pretty crazy.
That's crazy.
Let me kind of block you in. You going to run again?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it would have to be a situation that I felt a calling for lack of a better way to describe it. It would have to be a situation where I can make a difference. And so many people have said to me, well, why don't you run for city board or for delegate or something, at a lower level in Virginia? And I think one of the problems that I have, that certainly a lot of people have, is that I didn't go to school here. So while my father lived in Virginia and I spent a lot of time here, I had to live with my mother, so I went to school in Florida. And I think at certain offices, it's better if you're really that familiar with the whole area.
Well, I don't know you that well. Just from what I assess, you would probably make an impact at any level.
Oh, thank
so
you. I appreciate that.
I encourage you and everyone else to run. I ran once before. I may or may not do it, but I think everyone should. And
what did you run for?
From Herndon, I ran for town council.
Oh, okay.
In a very anti-Latino wave, I lost by 52 or 54 votes or something.
Wow.
Here on town council.
Wow.
But what I learned was when you get out and you talk to people, there's some people that are crazy. They're going to love you or they're going to hate you. But there's so many more people that just want you to get something done.
Right.
Right. And those are the people I think that really need the voice.
Well, in business, I was always told you walk into a room with 10 people. 2 people are going to love you, 2 people are going to hate you, and the other 6 people are going to be indifferent. And I would say to my campaign staff, we need the 6 people.
Right.
These are the people that we're out talking to. It's the people that aren't paying enough attention, that aren't looking for their freedom, especially a lot with millennials, because we would go out and really talk to the millennials because they're not voting, they're not paying enough attention, and people in other parts of the world are dying to have freedom to vote.
Well, Gwendolyn, I hope you come back and make an announcement or just come back and talk some more.
Okay, I'd love to. Thanks, Cesar.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to fail.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has the drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
24. Hi. In this segment, I've asked Mr. Camenni to rejoin us. We're going to talk about, Bill, the 2014 elections. How did the GOP do it?
I don't think they did it so much as the American people did it.
Okay.
And I asked to put as a backdrop here the Abraham Lincoln, because back in his time he made a comment about you can fool some of the people all of the time.
Sure.
You can fool all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time.
Right.
And I think what we saw in the last election was, on the Democrat side of the House, that you couldn't fool all the people all the time.
Well, it was a pasting.
Catches up to you.
It was a pasting, Bill.
It really was.
Yeah.
And of course the Republicans went through the same thing, and people said, you're not going to fool us this time, back in 2006 and 2008. So I think it was not a victory for Republicans, not a defeat so much for Democrats, other than they set the table for their own defeat and demise, but for the fact the American people, every now and then they do rise up and they kind of come to a right decision to say, let's right the boat here. It's not going the right way, and let's do something about it.
So speaking of the American people, the voter, it was a low turnout. There wasn't a lot of energy from what I could tell out there. Did you hear, I mean, what was your take on the election?
Well, I think historically you find it's not that much different from other midterm elections. And I have heartburn when everybody talks about low turnout. You know, the people who don't show up, in spite of Barack Obama's comment about the 2/3 who didn't vote, they vote. They actually are voting. They're
staying home.
That's right.
Staying home, sure.
As Yogi Berra once said, when people were complaining about why a restaurant wasn't getting a lot of people or why they weren't coming to the ball game, is if they want to stay home, you can't stop them.
Right.
Well, it's the same thing here. If they want to stay home, you can't stop them.
That is a vote. It's a vote of no confidence.
So whenever I worry about that, plus I get very much concerned about the voters who go into that booth uninformed. I don't think it's great if we have 98% turnout. If 45% of that 98% doesn't have a clue what they're doing, and they're either saying, well, I'm a Republican, I'm going to vote Republican, or I'm a Democrat, I don't know who these guys are, but I was told to do it, or I did it for the last 30 generations of my
Bill,
family.
that's the game these days. That's the game that is at hand.
Well, that's true. So what are we going to do about stopping that, Cesar?
Well, hell, I don't know, Bill. That's the parties that have basically driven the divide, and it's not about the substance of an issue, in my opinion. It's about which side can get out an identified group of people to the polls on any given day.
That's true, and it's the issue discussions are just not relevant there. It's
sound bites.
It's just right, the sound bites and that. Now, there are ways I think we can fix that, but it's going to take a compliant America. One is they got to start learning about what the hell's going on in their in politics.
Sure.
When we see the old Jay Leno Jaywalker series, or the Jimmy Fallon, or the Jimmy Kimmel series, or the Jesse
Who's the
Waters,
vice president?
Right, and they can't identify that, and then you see that same person next day going into the booth. I think, wait, something is wrong here.
So where do we start, Bill? I mean, let's pick up the whole redistricting effort. Every 10 years, census, redistricting happens. I think that's contributing to a lot of these benighted individuals that, quite frankly, no one's targeting because...
No, I agree. It's, as a matter of fact, what you're saying on that, plus your comment with Gwendolyn there about term limits and that, makes me ask, why are you a Democrat?
Well, Bill, I've said to you before, we're not that dissimilar.
But you're quite right. Like, as they say, nowadays, voters don't pick the candidates. Candidates pick their voters through redistricting.
That's right.
And I think that's wrong. I think you're going to have to get rid of that redistricting where it's done right now. With the technology we have, there are ways we can do that where it's divided more along cultural and geographic lines and more along common interest lines. For instance, you and I both live in Herndon. Well, we should have Herndon interest at our heart. We may disagree on what they are in particular.
And we do. We do all the time.
But the point is, we should not have the middle of Herndon have a line go down because these guys support the Democrats and these guys tend to heavily support the Republicans, so we redistrict on that. That's step one. Step two is, and Gwendolyn and you very much addressed this here, is term limits. I don't think anything is going to change until you impose term limits.
Agreed.
And for all those people that say you can't, well, the biggest office in the land has term limits.
Right.
So why can't we other?
Sure.
But if you get in your job for a long time, you're no longer a citizen. You're a totally different elite.
Right.
And too many people now that we have in politics have never had a real job, as you people discussed earlier, in their lives. They start out in high school running for student government, then they get a job out of college with some mayor's office, and then they become a staffer, and then next thing you know, somebody's asking them to run for a local office, and then a congressman, and then senator, and next thing you know, we have people in their 60s serving 40 years who have never had, never balanced a budget or paid a payroll, telling the rest of us how to live. So I think term limits is one, the redistricting is another. I think ancillary, but not necessarily a primal force in there, is also we got to do something about the elections and make them a little more, both we get the turnout of the people who are informed, and also we stop the fraud on that, because in certain elections that can flip an election, and it's so tight now with this 51-49 splits, it seems, that a very small one state here, another congressman there, and next thing you know you have a flip of a House or Senate. So I think there's a lot of things we can do. Unfortunately, who's going to do this? The guys downtown, and they're detached. They're taking care of their own interest and not ours.
Well, it starts at home. So let's talk about Virginia, if we can, for a little bit.
Sure.
So the election results, anything surprise you with what happened here in Virginia?
I did not think Lesby was going to do as well as he did, but I fault that to the fact that we don't also get a good press on political scene. Everything nowadays is poll driven, and the only poll that really counts is election day.
That's right.
But all these polls, they don't report events, they are shaping events. If you're, as Gwendolyn mentioned there, at the start of her campaign, when you start seeing I'm getting 5%, 6% of the vote, that's very disheartening. And then as we found out, that means money doesn't come in. That means all the endorsements don't come in. Even though you might be the best candidate and have the best positions on the issues and that, you don't stand a chance.
Right, because as she said, someone's already making the decision on who the viable candidates are. No, I completely agree. I think, first of all, we don't agree on a lot of things, but I will tell you, we agree on a couple things already. I'll name them. This whole term limitation, the redistricting. I would like us to see if we could agree on this. In terms of people making contributions, here in Virginia, there's really no limitation other than disclosing on your financial reporting. So is that something that we should change here in Virginia?
Well, it's maybe if you're fair about it. For instance, somebody can give you a litany of the Koch brothers or Warren Buffett.
It's out of state money, Bill.
That's true, of what they're doing. But there's a lot of stuff under the rug you don't ever hear about. For instance, the unions somehow get exempt from their reporting on how much they actually spend. Oh, sure, it's out there, but you'll never see a Washington Post headline about ACLU, I mean not ACLU, the AFL-CIO is spending $25 million to beat Joe Smith on that. But you'll certainly see it. Koch brothers are out there spending $22 million.
But they have to, the candidate, if I as a candidate benefit, I have to disclose that as an in-kind contribution. Otherwise, I'm going to jail.
Well, no, that's true. They're out there. I mean, the information's out there, but it's out there in such a way that who's going to look for it? I mean, we have uninformed voters that can't tell you what's going on. They certainly aren't going to go into the State Board of Elections website and find out who in the first quarter gave how much to this candidate and that candidate. They're just not going to do it.
So how do we get people engaged, informed? I mean, this is a cultural issue, I think.
Well, one step is when you finally do get up and angered enough like the voters were in this last election, and like they were in 2006 and 8 for the other side on that, is that's the time to strike and start insisting on some of those remedies that we talked about, that the candidates support them. I want to support a candidate who says, I'm going to be there 6 years and I've already signed my resignation after the 6 years or whatever. Or I'm not going to accept money from XYZ Corporation who just happens to have the oil fields in my district that that I'm going to support. So also redistricting. When I get involved in the redistricting, if I'm a state legislator, I'm going to say, no, stop this nonsense here. Even if it means my job, that's not the way we should do it.
Yeah.
So
especially in Congress, the House, they probably get one good solid year to focus, and then they're running for re-election. They're raising money again. So they can't really focus on getting anything
Well,
done.
one advantage of term limits, whether it be, let's say, a 6-year for Congress or 12 years or 12 years for the Senate, is on that last time around, they won't be worrying about fundraising, and they might actually start doing something because they don't have to worry.
But then they're considered lame ducks at that point, and they're out the door.
But if they're all lame ducks, then they become a governing force.
Okay. I take it you're not really thrilled with the 2014 results in terms of what happened because of some of the way it happened. Am I misunderstanding that?
Well, I'm happy for the results in that I think from my political perspective, a lot of bad things are happening right now. The Constitution seems to be an artifact that nobody wants to pay attention to anymore. Nobody seems to be out there caring for the middleman, the middle American. Nobody seems. The people on the low end of the economic spectrum seem to have their cares addressed, and the people at the top are getting wealthier and wealthier and more powerful and more powerful.
It's interesting you say that. I don't know if you sent it to me or I read it somewhere else, but since World War II, companies and workers benefited. You know, they made profits, they shared. Companies today are making record profits, but minimum wage is all-time low compared to the sort of like averaged income over the years. And people don't seem to be up in a roar about that. I mean, when you've got these major corporations making billions in profits and the average worker doesn't benefit or share in that success, that's an issue. So how does that get resolved?
We need a better type of CEO. Now that sounds facetious.
Okay.
Let me tell you, I started out with IBM back in the 1950s and 60s, right? And this was the IBM of the Watson family. Tom Watson Sr., then Tom Watson Jr. Tom Watson Jr. in his memoirs, and he was the one that took IBM into the computer age and made it the big giant, big blue that it became. And that he made a comment in his memoirs about he could have taken as much money as he wanted out of that company. But he said, I had an obligation to my employees. They were the ones that put us in the position we were, as the dominant force we were. So I felt I could not, in good conscience, take all of the money that I could have and ignore my employees. And as a result, as an IBM employee, we were the best paid in our industry. We had benefits that you could not believe. We had employee country clubs.
You know, I got chills when you said that. My first job was with EDS, Ross Perot.
Who was an IBM's
Bingo. I mean, what you said just resonated with me. Something's been lost. I mean, those folks, that mindset, that sort of shared success is gone now. It really is.
No, I agree, and I think we have to, again, nobody's looking out for middle America. How do you fix that? Well, like I said, one way is get a better CEOs.
Well, but they're drifting, Bill, you know, quarter to quarter, profits for that quarter. It's really tough.
And just like we have a political class in the electoral side of the House, we also have in the corporate side sort of an inner family there where you must be a lawyer or the old founders of the companies are no longer around.
Sure, it's run. They've already handpicked their person. Bill, we're going to be back in the next segment. Folks, you're going to stick around for this one as well. We're going to look at 2015 and 2016, the elections to come. Stick around.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to our final segment here with my guest and friend, Bill Camenni. We're going to be talking about now the 2015-16. We'll look ahead at the elections, Bill. What do you see out there in 2015?
Well, first let me start off by saying I am not a candidate.
Okay.
I will not be running for President of the United States in 2016.
Well,
now, I know that makes the field have a sigh of relief, but I'm not going to be there. Sorry.
Okay, well, that's good to know, but let's talk about state before we jump there. Sure. Next year, big state races here in Virginia. We've got, we're from Herndon, but we've got in Drainesville, we've got supervisor, we've got chair, we've got school board, we've got House and state. We've got water and soil. I mean, there's probably 70 races here in Fairfax County. What do you think people are going to be focused on?
I don't know, for the simple reason is, one, we don't know what's going to be happening between now and then. I mean, there are a couple of things floating out there, like we're having budget problems right now. There's not enough money to do all the things we want to do. We have that perennial issue of the roads and highways and all that. But again, sometimes I wonder how real that is. I mean, yes, we need a lot of money to keep the roads and keep the infrastructure modernized and up to date and all that stuff. But I hear that all the time, and I don't see any progress being made. So is this just a come on to get people to think you're really doing the job for these politicians when you're really not, or you don't want to do it because you want the issue out there for the next election?
Well, around here, I'm seeing, let's talk about some funding of some of the transportation, the roadways here. This Easy Pass, this 395, the corridor, 95,
the Lexus lanes.
The Lexus lanes. Now, why are they called the Lexus lanes, Bill?
Same reason you and I know about one. Namely, it's everybody pays taxes for those roads.
Sure.
And I have a problem when you start, saying, well, okay, we're going to essentially make it an income distribution, redistribution type thing here, where we're going to take from those who can afford it.
But that was a partnership. I mean, the developer, the state, they kind of went to this partnership.
And I disagree with all of them. Okay. Of course, the developers...
by the way, we're on the same side here, so don't be scared.
I mean, public highways are public highways.
Yeah.
The country started out, every one of these turnpikes around here are there because, named turnpike because people charge a road, but somebody individually built them. Right. The Leesburg Turnpike, all those over there. But that was for a horse and wagon era when you're trying to build roads across the wilderness. And now roads are the essential ingredient of commerce. I mean, most of our traffic comes, even if it came on a train, most of the way it comes the rest of the way on a truck. We need the interstate system, which was probably one of the most brilliant ideas ever launched as far as Americans' infrastructure has gone, and give Eisenhower thanks for that. But now it seems like we don't have any big picture vision for how we're going to handle that. It's just kind of struggling to keep the paint on the pig to make it look like it's pretty when it's we're not going to really do much about it there.
I feel the same pain. It's you and I live in Herndon. Did you get on the Greenway Toll Road to come to the studio today?
No, I didn't, because I avoided because I can't afford the outrageous tolls they have on there.
Expensive.
That's truly a Lexus lane up there.
But I mean, if you're coming from Leesburg and you're on that Greenway, you get on the toll road into Tyson's Corner, that's like $12 one way.
That's right, and multiply that times 10 per week, times 50 per year, and all of a sudden, as Everett Dirksen used to say, pretty soon you have a lot of money out there.
Yeah.
And now, of course, we're in the rich Washington area where the average salary is $204 million or something like that. Well, 100,000.
Well, it's depending on what district you're in.
But imagine if you're somebody who's a household domestic, and you got to drive that same way, and you're getting all
on Route 7.
Right. You're on Route 7. You're
traffic lights.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm against the way they've gone about that. I think public roads are just that, and we ought to start addressing that rather than keep turning it over for some Australian or other company to make a lot of money in the future.
I don't see that, and I know a few of the folks on the Board of Supervisors. I don't hear that that's going to be a big issue, but voters need to make it an issue if it's something they value.
Well, maybe by the time the election comes around, after they had the year or two experience on the Lexus lanes, they might start saying, you know what, I'd like to do that too, but I can't.
Did you come up with that, by the way, that brand?
The Lexus lanes? No, I found that from someone else.
Okay, I'm benighted. I hadn't heard that before. So what other some of the topics that might come up?
Well, we have a problem in Virginia in that we have two areas of high prosperity, and the rest of the state is kind of not doing that well.
Yeah, it's Northern Virginia and everyone else.
Northern Virginia is sort of an economic enclave of its own. I mean, what is it? The 6 of the 10 richest counties in America are in the Washington area, and 4 of them are in Virginia. And that. So we hear, even though you and I are struggling and suffering, right? We here in the Northern Virginia area don't understand what it's like to be in that coal mine area out there in Southwest Virginia, especially now that you have an administration that's saying, I don't want any of the coal mines open. Let's shut them all down. So that may be something that flips the election around. I know we put a lot of emphasis, one, because the media's up here, that how Fairfax goes, the world goes, and all that.
You sound like someone I know.
You?
Jim Webb.
Jim Webb, yeah.
Okay. He talks about the economic divide in the country. And his background is very much that sort of, he knows the Appalachian, he knows sort of that culture and really the challenges that folks face.
And when Jim Webb was a senator, he was open to other parties, other ideas on that. He was, remember, he voted against the immigration bill in 2006
yes, he did.
and 7
Yes, he did.
because he felt that's not doing the people of Virginia, the working people, any good. It's too much competition, it's cutting their wages and salaries, and well, I have too many people out here in Southwest and South Central Virginia that are struggling to get jobs. And he was a good man in that sense there.
Were you sad to see him retire out of the Senate?
Well, I would have supported a good conservative guy in his place.
Okay, just asking. Just asking.
But he was refreshing in that sense. There is that he could buck the system and buck his party.
Yeah.
And I wish, there's a message for Republicans in this coming 2015-16 period that we're talking about too. Is that they're on notice that we gave you the gavels, but if you mess up, you're going to be out on your behinds just like we kicked the guys out that you replaced. Sure. And I don't think they understand that, because the first signs I'm seeing, it's pretty clear on what issues the Republicans were put in office on, because people were sick of what the Democrats were doing. But the very first things I start seeing are on some of like the McConnells and Boehners and that is going back on the very things that gave them the big majority they got now. And you start saying, who are you serving? Are you serving the big interest, the Chamber of Commerce, the Wall Street Journal, or are you trying to serve the American people, especially the middle America that everybody seems to have no spokesman for?
I know we're focusing on the upcoming races, but just real quick, did the Eric Cantor loss surprise you at all?
It surprised me, but it made me happy.
Okay.
Because he was a perfect example of what was wrong with the Republican Party in that it tends to be run by an establishment elite who talk the game. They talk the game pretty well, especially for election. But then, as Gwendolyn mentioned there, when it comes time to governing, they kind of forget all those people that put them in there. Yeah. And you sit around wondering, well, who's representing me? I'm a nobody, and who represents me? If the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal open their mouth, they get whatever they want. On the Democrat side, if the unions open their mouth or some special interest group, they get whatever they want. But I'm just an average guy, and nobody's looking after me, or I'm a blue-collar Democrat, nobody cares about me. So I think we have problems there, and the Republicans better wise up, or they're going to be watching from the sidelines.
Do you see anyone on the Republican side that's emerging that you like? That's someone that's
I mean, for the presidential?
Yeah, let's talk about
I have a preference. It's Ted Cruz.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it about Ted that gets you fired up?
One, he has a belief system. He's not someone who says something just for effect, but he doesn't really want to ever live up to it. I mean, he believes in constitutional law, and we drifted from it. I mean, the reason I put that up with the link in there is that this supposedly was a government. Remember, we the people? That's the first words of the Constitution. And the Lincoln's comment about we're here to preserve, with the Civil War, to preserve government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We've lost that. It's government of the special interests, by the high payers, and for the other special interests there. We need to get back to that. And I think Ted Cruz is a guy who understands the constitutional structure behind what America is all about there, and that, as I joke with people when they tell me, well, the Constitution's flexible, it's, I said, look, do you go through green lights? And they laugh at me. Of course I go through green lights. I said, well, do you realize you're implying that the other guy is going to observe the red light? He's going to obey the law. Because the law is the thing that keeps us all from being animals. Well, if you start shredding the Constitution, you're essentially saying, I'm above the law. I can go through that red light because I write my own rules. And we got to get back to that. I mean, if we follow that, 200 years later, that's a pretty good document. And if we follow that, I think we get out of a lot of the messes we're in right now.
Anyone else on the Republican side that you like?
I'm still lukewarm. Scott Walker seems to be, seems to have proven himself as an administrator for cutting cost of government and all.
Survived a recall.
And he's 3 elections in 4 years is pretty good, especially when everybody's lined up against you, supposedly. But then again, I don't think we get an honest opinion of who really is up against it. Going back to Gwendolyn there, suppose they started out in the press and the Washington Post and me saying, oh, it looks like she's got 51% of in this poll here, the money would have poured in for her, even though she was an independent and all that stuff. But when you have a cheering section, instead of reporting, should be actually they should be reporting, but instead they're taking sides, and that's not good for America.
Who would you like to see your guys face on the Democratic side?
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, why is that?
Because I think she's very much overrated on her vote-getting ability, and I think maybe some of the Democrats are starting to wake up to that. And I think she'd be a terrible campaigner. We're also seeing signs of that too. She's not good off this speech, and then she's saying some kind of weird and inane things that you kind of say, did she really say that? And I think she'd make the ideal opponent, even though everyone says, oh, she's a shoo-in, and polls show that she's 52% to Romney as 46% or 51 to somebody else, Rand Paul. They're polls. Remember all those polls that were saying it was too close to call the day before election?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, well, a lot of Democrats are wondering what happened there.
Well, yeah. But I think Democrats will line up behind, a lot of Democrats will line up behind Hillary Clinton, just because, I mean, for her to have come so close last time, I think she's going to get a lot of support. Now, me personally, I think you'll have some folks probably step up. I'm not going to go out and, endorse anyone, but I don't think it's going to be a straight walk for her. A lot of people think it is. I feel she'll get challenged. She'll get challenged from the left, and basically pull the party back to the values. And I think it's going to be an interesting 2016, quite frankly. So
I'll try and hang around for it.
Well, I think you might be right. Let me tell you, it's going to be a big time for both parties. So, Bill, I want to thank you, first of all, for your service.
It's a pleasure being here.
I really do. And I want to, secondly, thank you for coming on. I've enjoyed this, and I hope you have as well.
Very much so.
Yeah? So we're not so different. Folks, I want to certainly say thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope you enjoyed it. We're going to have more shows on the 2015 as well as the 16th, so join us soon. Thanks.